My name is Heather Calloway, and I'm 29 years old. 8 months ago, I woke up in a hospital bed with a tube down my throat and a nurse I'd never met holding my hand. The first thing I said when they pulled the tube out was, "Did anyone call my parents?" She paused before answering. That pause told me everything. They'd been called 3 times. My surgeon, Dr. Alexis Ewan, reached them at 9:47 a.m. She told them I was in emergency surgery, that there were complications, that I might not come out of it. My mom's response, documented in the nursing notes I later requested: "She's always been the resilient one. She'll pull through. We're a little tied up right now." A little tied up. I had a collapsed lung on an operating table and they were a little tied up. I should back up. Growing up in Bend, Oregon, I told myself it was just the way things were. My brother Ethan was 4 years younger than me, and from the moment he picked up a lacrosse stick at age 7, our house reorganized itself around him. Practice schedules on the fridge. Weekend drives to club tournaments in Portland and Eugene. My parents in matching team hoodies, faces lit up like I'd never seen them lit up at anything else. I was 16 when I started noticing the math didn't add up. Not the emotional math, I'd stopped counting that years before. The actual math, the money math. I'd gotten a part-time job at a bakery called Sunrise Cone on the east side of town, $12.75 an hour, Thursday through Sunday. My dad sat me down the week I got hired and explained the plan. He called it the Calloway Family Fund. He said it was for both of us, me and Ethan, college, emergencies, our futures. A joint account where I'd deposit my paychecks and they'd match contributions when they could. I was 16 and I believed him. I thought this was what families did. My first paycheck was $386. I deposited every dollar. I kept depositing every dollar for the next 9 years. The last time I went home before everything happened, it was Thanksgiving. I was 28 and I stood in the kitchen while my mom arranged the centerpiece, and I looked around at the walls. Really looked. There was a shadow box above the mantel with Ethan's lacrosse highlights, newspaper clippings, a photo from his Division I signing day, his jersey from UNC Wilmington. Next to it, a collage of tournament photos. Below it, a framed article from the Bend Bulletin. Local athlete eyes pro career. There was one photo of me, my college graduation, in the background of a shot that was clearly taken to capture Ethan throwing his arm around our dad. I was the blur in the corner. I went to the bathroom and stood in front of the mirror for a full minute. Then I went back to the kitchen and helped set the table and didn't say a word. That's what I always did. Made myself small enough to fit around the edges of Ethan's life. April 3rd of last year. That's the date everything started. I'd been having chest pain for 2 weeks. Non-dramatic chest pain, the kind that makes you call 911. The dull, persistent kind that I kept telling myself was stress. I was a pediatric occupational therapist at a clinic in Redmond, and my caseload had been brutal that quarter. I figured I'd stretch something. I figured I was tired. I figured I was fine on my own. I wasn't fine. My coworker Bridget, the clinic's front desk coordinator, is the one who finally made me call my doctor. She watched me wince through a Monday morning staff meeting and said flatly, "You're calling Dr. Tan Patterson today, or I'm calling her for you." I called. They set me for imaging that afternoon. By Thursday, I was sitting across from a cardiothoracic surgeon named Dr. Ewing, who was explaining, in very calm, careful words, that I had a large pleural effusion on my left lung and a mass on my pericardium that needed to come out immediately. I remember staring at the diagram she'd drawn on a notepad and thinking, I need to call my mom. I did call her. That night, I told her what Dr. Yoon said. Surgery was scheduled for Monday, April 7th. I'd be at St. Charles Medical Center. It was serious, but the prognosis was good if we moved fast. My mom's response, "Oh honey, that's so scary. Hey, did you know Ethan's combined showcase is that same week? He's been training so hard, we're flying out to Charlotte on the 6th. I didn't say anything. She filled the silence. "I'm sure you'll be fine. Dr. Ewan sounds very competent. We'll call you after Ethan's event, okay? Keep us posted." Keep us posted. Like I was sending dispatches from a camping trip. My dad texted the next morning. "Heather, hang in there. Ethan's combine could be huge for his career. You've always been the tough one. We'll check in soon." I put my phone down on my kitchen counter and I sat on the floor next to it for a while, not crying, just sitting. Then I got up, called Bridget, and asked if she could drive me to pre-op on Monday. She said yes before I'd finished the sentence. April 7th, 6:15 a.m. Bridget dropped me off at admissions. She'd made me a thermos of tea I couldn't drink because of pre-op restrictions, and she handed it to me anyway, just so I'd have something to hold. The intake nurse, a woman named Gretchen with a pin of a golden retriever on her badge, asked me to list my emergency contacts. I wrote down my parents' names and numbers. Habit. 9 years of habit. I went into surgery at 8:20 a.m. I woke up at 2:47 p.m. in the ICU with the tube, and the nurse, and the pause. Her name was Diane Chen. Not the doctor, a different Diane. She was patient and quiet, and she handed me a cup of ice chips and told me surgery had gone well, but there'd been a complication mid-procedure, a secondary bleed they hadn't anticipated. Dr. Ewan had been on her feet for 6 hours. I asked about my parents again. Diane's face did what faces do when they're trying not to say something. She showed me the log. 3 calls to my mother's cell, beginning at 9:47 a.m. when the complication was flagged, 1 call back at 11:32 a.m., 2 minutes and 4 seconds. My mother had been informed I was in critical condition. She'd said they were managing a situation and would call back. They never called back. At 1:18 p.m., while Dr. Ewan was still working to stop the secondary bleed, my dad posted on Facebook. Photo of Ethan in his Combine jersey, stadium lights behind him, both my parents grinning. Caption: watching this kid chase his dream. So proud doesn't begin to cover it. Number lax dad, number combine ready, number pro bound Ethan. 43 likes by the time I saw it. I looked at the timestamp and then I looked at the ceiling, and I didn't say anything for a long time. Bridget was in the waiting room. She'd been there since 8 a.m. She came in when Diane told her I was awake, and she sat in the chair next to my bed and held my hand, and she was crying and I wasn't, which felt strange. "Have you reached your parents?" she asked. "They're at my brother's showcase in Charlotte." She looked at my Ivy line, then at the window. Then she said, "I'm not leaving until you're stable." She stayed until 9 p.m. day 2. My clinic director, a woman named Dr. Veronica Holt, came in at noon carrying my work laptop, my phone charger, and a bag of things Bridget had packed from my apartment. She sat down in the visitor's chair and said, "I've been trying to reach your parents since yesterday. I've left 4 messages." I told her about Charlotte. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, "I want you to know that your patients' families have been asking about you. The Garcias, the Petersons." Little Theo's mom called twice this morning. Theo's mom cried on the phone with Veronica. My own mother couldn't call back. Before Veronica left, I asked to borrow her laptop charger. I needed to check something. Day 3. I called medical records. I wanted my complete file, physician's notes, nursing logs, visitor records, every call made from the hospital on my behalf. The clerk told me I'd have them within 48 hours. I thanked her. Then I opened my banking app. I hadn't looked at the Callaway Family Fund balance in over a year. I'd been depositing automatically since I set up direct deposit at my first real job. I trusted the system. I trusted them. The balance was $9,340. I had deposited by my own calculation, somewhere around $140,000 over 9 years. I stared at that number for a long time. I started downloading statements. Day 4, a woman from billing came by, soft knock, apologetic expression. Her name was Iris. She explained that they'd reached my emergency contacts about financial guarantorship, and my parents had indicated I was financially independent and capable of handling my own accounts. They said that while you were in the ICU, I confirmed. She nodded, uncomfortable. My teacher's union insurance would cover a significant portion. But significant portion and everything are different numbers. I signed the forms. Iris muttered something as she left. Diane, who was adjusting my IV, told me later what she'd said. "I've worked billing for 16 years. I've never had parents decline to be listed as financial contacts while their kid was in critical care. That afternoon, I'd pulled up my bank statements going back to 2015. I was 17 when I opened the fund account. I'd made my first deposit November 14th of that year, $354. My paycheck from Sunrise Co. The memo line said, "For us." I built a spreadsheet in the Notes app on my phone. Every deposit I could find, November 2015 through April 2024. Deposits totaling $138,420. Deposits totaling $138,429. Then I looked at the withdrawals. June 2018, $68,800. Memo, Eatlet Cross Academy Summer Intensive. September 2019, $11,200. Memo, NCLP Showcase Circuit Registration plus Travel. March 2021, $14,500. Memo, Private Coaching Retainer, Coach Whitmore, full year. October 2022, $9,000. Memo, Combined Prep Program, Charlotte Facility. I went through every single one. Coach Whitmore's retainer. 4 years, $47,000. National Circuit Tournament fees, 2023, $32,600. Equipment, travel, sports nutrition programs, a sports nutrition programs, a sports psychologist, $28,000. One withdrawal, September 2023. Memo, Ethan apartment deposit, $4,200. They used my money to help him move into his off-campus apartment. Total withdrawn, $129,080. 0 for Heather. Every memo line mentioned Ethan or lacrosse. Not once in 9 years was a single dollar used for the person who earned it. $9,040 with my $9.40. Day 5. My parents called, both of them back to back, the morning after Ethan's showcase ended. Showcase weekend was over. I was relevant again. "Mom, Heather, honey, we just landed. How are you feeling?" We heard it was a little touch and go. A little touch and go. I said I was resting and would call her back. I didn't call her back. I requested copies of their email account instead. I still had their password. They'd given it to me in 2021 when I was managing some insurance paperwork for them. Dad hadn't changed it. The password was Ethan Lax 2006. I searched for the name of the Combine facility. The email thread was from February. Subject line, Investment Planning for EC Professional Development Pathway. My dad's message, third in the thread, "We're all in on Ethan. The assessment metrics from Coach Whitmore show legitimate MLL potential if we stay aggressive with development funding over the next 18 months. Heather's 28, working, fully self-sufficient. She's always landed on her feet. Ethan needs this window. We want to discuss redirecting all discretionary family funds toward the Combine Prep package. What does the full investment look like? She's always landed on her feet." That phrase, I'd heard it my entire life. Every time I needed them and they weren't there. Heather's fine. Heather lands on her feet. Heather doesn't need us. It wasn't an observation. It was a permission slip they'd written for themselves. I screenshotted the email, added it to the folder I was building. Day 6. Bridget came by and found me surrounded by my phone, a notepad covered in numbers, and 3 empty water cups. She looked at the notepad. "What are you doing?" "Documenting," I said. She sat down. "How much?" "Everything." She was quiet. "Then, what are you going to do with it?" I hadn't fully decided yet, but I was starting to get an idea. Ethan's college graduation party. My parents had been planning it for months. June 14th. Outdoor venue in Portland, 120 guests. Extended family, Ethan's coaches, his agent contact, teammates, my parents' church friends, the couple they'd vacationed with for 15 years, the reporter from the Bend Bulletin who'd covered Ethan's high school career. Everyone who mattered to them would be in one room. Day 7. They discharged me. My parents texted that morning asking what time they should come get me. I looked at that text for a full minute. They hadn't come in 7 days. Now that I was healthy enough to walk, I was worth the trip. I texted back, "Already arranged." "Thanks." My mom called twice. I watched the calls come through and go to voicemail and felt, for the first time in a week, something that wasn't nausea or grief. It felt like clarity. Bridget picked me up. She brought the thermos of tea again, the one from surgery day. Still the same tea. She'd kept it in her car. I cried in the passenger seat the whole way home. She didn't say anything. She just drove. The week after I got home, I sat at my kitchen table with everything printed out. Bank statements, the email, medical records, the nursing log, the Facebook post time-stamped against my surgical notes. 43 pages. I also found something else. When I was in the hospital, I'd been thinking about my grandmother on my mom's side. Grandma June. She died 3 years earlier. March 2021 at 81 in her house in Astoria. She'd left me her house. My mom mentioned it once, briefly at dinner. Gran left you the Astoria property, but there were so many expenses, the estate barely covered everything. I'd nodded and moved on. I was grieving and exhausted, and I trusted them. I shouldn't have. I pulled up Oregon probate records from home, Case 21, PB 0417. Estate of June Carol Mathers. Filed April 2021. Total assets, $1,089,000. Real property, 2214 Riverview Terrace, Astoria, $740,000. Bank accounts, $298,000. Personal property, $51,000. Primary beneficiary, Heather Ann Calloway. Successor trustees, Robert and Lynn Calloway. My parents. Primary beneficiary. I read it 4 times. I pulled real estate records. 2214 Riverview Terrace. Sold July 8, 2021. 4 months after Grandma June died. Sale price $735,000. Authorized signature Robert Calloway, successor trustee. They sold it in 4 months. While I was still wearing black to her memorial service, I called my dad that afternoon. Kept my voice even. Hey Dad, I've been thinking about Grandma June's estate. I found some old documents. Can you walk me through what happened with it? A pause. Estate expenses, Heather. Legal fees, taxes, the debts she had on the property. You know how it goes. There wasn't much left after everything settled. How much is not much? Maybe 25,000. We set it aside for family use. 25,000. He was describing $1 million estate as $25,000. I didn't push back. I thanked him and got off the phone and opened a bank account they'd kept me on as a joint holder until I was 22. I still had view access to the statement history. August 2021, deposit $735,000, memo escrow 2214 Team Riverview. Deposit $298,000, memo estate distribution Mathers Trust. October 2021, withdrawal $1IH $6,000, memo Elite Cross Academy Facility Investment. November 2021 through 2023, various withdrawals totaling $420,000. Memos. Showcase fees, coaching contracts, Charlotte combined deposit, kitchen renovation $64,000, Mali trip $18,000, new truck $57,000. Grandma June loved me. She left me her home because she'd told me, the summer before she died, that I was the one who called her every Sunday. That I was the one who drove to Astoria alone when she had her hip surgery. That I was the one who sat on her back porch with her drinking iced tea and watching the ships come in through the Columbia and saying nothing, just being there. She left me everything. They took everything. They took everything. Then they told me there was nothing left. I sat at my kitchen table and I let myself cry for the first time since before surgery. Not for me, for her, for what she'd wanted and never got to give me. Then I dried my face and called an attorney. Her name was Miriam Park, estate litigation, downtown Portland. I'd found her through the Oregon State Bar referral line. I came in with 43 pages. She went through them methodically, the bank statements, the probate records, the emails, the medical logs. When she finished, she looked up at me and said, "As successor trustees, your parents had a fiduciary obligation to notify you as the beneficiary and distribute assets according to the trust. What they did constitutes breach of fiduciary duty and conversion of trust assets. This is recoverable. How much? Conservative estimate $580,000 to $640,000 when you include the trust assets, the fund withdrawals, and applicable interest. Potentially more with punitive damages given the concealment and the documented emails showing intent. I thought about Ethan's graduation party. June 14th. Outdoor venue in Portland, 120 guests. My mom had texted me 3 weeks earlier. We'd love for you to be there. It would mean so much to Ethan. She'd included a photo of the invitation. Watercolor lacrosse sticks in the corner. Catered dinner, live music. A photo wall of Ethan's career highlights. I asked Miriam when we could file. She looked at me steadily. When do you want to file? June 15th, I said, the day after the party. She nodded once. Document everything at that event. I told her documentation was exactly what I'd planned. I started writing the letter on May 20th. I wrote 6 drafts. The first was too raw. The third was too clinical. The 6th was right. I printed it on plain white paper, folded it in thirds, sealed it in a plain white envelope with Ethan's name on the front. I wrote and rewrote the last paragraph 11 times. On June 2nd, my parents sent a revised party invite. Updated guest list, 140 people now. 3 of Ethan's coaches, 2 agents, a journalist from the Oregonian covering his transition to the semi-pro circuit, everyone who mattered to them in one room. My mom's text. Heather, please try to make it. We want the whole family there. The whole family. I read that twice. I replied 5 hours later, I'll send something for Ethan. It'll be there by noon. She responded with a heart emoji. She had no idea. June 14th. I wasn't at the venue. Bridget was. I told her everything over coffee the week before. She'd listened without interrupting until I finished, and then she said, What do you need from me? I need someone there who loves me. She wore a yellow dress. She told me she chose it because she wanted to be easy to find in a crowd. The party started at 4 p.m. at Stafford Pavilion in Lake Oswego. String lights, catered tables, a custom banner. The guest list had grown to 144. At 4:40 p.m., a courier arrived. A plain white box tied with a white ribbon. Label in my handwriting for Ethan Calloway. From Heather. My mom beamed. She signed for it herself, set it with the gifts, said to my dad, loud enough for the nearby table to hear, Heather sent something. Isn't that sweet? At 5:15, the MC called everyone to gather for a toast. My dad stepped forward first, glass raised. He started to speak. He talked about sacrifice and investment and watching a dream become real. He got emotional. He said they'd given everything. Then the MC said, Before we toast, I understand Ethan's sister sent a gift since she couldn't make it. Ethan, why don't you open it? Ethan opened the box. He took out the envelope. He looked at his name on the front in my handwriting. He opened it. He started reading. His face changed. His girlfriend Kylie touched his arm. Ethan, what is it? He didn't answer. The MC leaned in, trying to keep the energy up. Oh, is it a card? Should I read it so everyone can hear? Ethan handed it over without looking up. The MC started reading. Ethan, I'm not there today, but I need you to hear this, and I need the people who love you to hear it too because the truth deserves witnesses. A few people smiled, expecting sentiment. 4 months ago, I went into emergency surgery with a collapsed lung and a mass on my pericardium. The hospital called our parents at 9:47 a.m. They were told I might not survive. They were at your combine showcase in Charlotte. They did not come. They did not call back. Our dad posted a photo of you on Facebook at 10:18 p.m. while my surgeon was trying to stop a bleed. The smiles dropped. I spent 7 days in the ICU. No one came. Bridget, my coworker, was there every day. My clinic director came twice. My parents called on day 5 when your showcase weekend was over. The room had gone completely quiet. While I was in the hospital, I started looking at the family fund, the one I'd contributed to since I was 17. The $3,420 over 9 years. When I checked, $9,340 remained. The rest, $129.80, was spent entirely on your training, your tournaments, your coaching contracts, your apartment deposit. Someone at the back table said quietly, "Oh my God." My dad stepped forward. "Okay, I think," Ethan's voice flat and low, "let him finish." The MC's hands were shaking slightly. He kept reading. "I found Grandma June's probate records. She left me her house in Astoria. She left me everything. Her estate was worth $1,089,000. Our parents sold the house 4 months after she died. They deposited the proceeds into their own account. They told me there was nothing left. There wasn't nothing left. There was everything left. They spent it. Kitchen renovation, vacations, a new truck, and $186,000 into an elite lacrosse academy facility the same fall she died." My dad's brother, Uncle Don, had stood up. He was staring at my dad. My dad wasn't looking at him. Ethan's coaches had stopped talking. The agents were looking at him. Ethan's coaches had stopped talking. The agents were looking at each other. The journalist had his phone out. The MC read the last paragraph, voice barely steady. "You didn't know any of this. I believe that. And I'm not writing this to destroy you. I'm writing it because you deserve to know who funded your dream, and because I am done being invisible. I am done being the one who's fine on her own. I am done being erased from every photo and every calendar and every conversation. The process server outside has paperwork for Mom and Dad. The attorney will explain the rest. I love you, Ethan. I hope someday we can actually know each other." 11 seconds of silence. Then a man stepped through the pavilion entrance. He was calm, direct, businesslike. "Robert and Lynn Calloway." My dad didn't move. "You've been served." He handed over the complaint. 51 pages, and walked back out. My mom reached for the papers. They scattered. The room broke apart. Uncle Don, voice shaking, "You sold June's house? She loved that girl. She asked about Heather every time I called." One of Ethan's coaches turned to the other and said something quiet. They moved toward the exit together. The Oregonian journalist was still filming. Ethan's girlfriend was crying. Kylie's mother leaned over and said something to her own husband, and they stood and gathered their things. Within 8 minutes, 47 people had left. The cake sat untouched. At 5:34 p.m., Bridget texted me, just 4 words, "It's done. Everyone knows." I was sitting on my apartment floor, back against the couch, phone in my hands. I read her message 4 times. Then I put my phone face down and sat in the quiet for a while. The following week, my parents called 38 times. I blocked the numbers. My dad left a voicemail from a number I didn't recognize. I listened once. "Heather, this is your father. You have humiliated this family in front of everyone we know. You have destroyed your brother's career before it started. Everything we did was for this family. Everything, and this is how you repay us? You've always been jealous of Ethan. I don't know where this bitterness comes from, but you need to think very carefully about what you've done. Call me back." I saved it to the evidence folder. I never called back. 10 days later, the Oregonian published a piece, "Local Family at Center of Estate Lawsuit Following Graduation Party Confrontation." 52,000 views in the first 48 hours. My parents hired an attorney. They sent a cease and desist through him. Miriam responded in 1 sentence, "My client stands by every documented fact." We welcome discovery. 6 weeks later, we went to mediation. Their attorney pushed hard. They wanted it settled quietly, before their emails and bank records became part of the public court file. Miriam had told me they would. She'd also told me that settlement would cost them more than they wanted to admit. "Full restitution," Miriam said across the table. "All Calloway Family Fund withdrawals attributable to Ethan's training. Full estate distribution from the Mathers Trust, minus documented and verifiable estate expenses, plus interest." The number came to $594,000. I signed. 3 weeks after the settlement, my parents listed the house. The Bent house, the one we'd grown up in, the one with the shadow box above the mantel. They had to. They moved into a 2-bedroom rental in Southeast Portland. I found out through Uncle Don, who had started texting me. He'd apologized 3 times. I believed him. I heard about Ethan through Bridget, who heard from Kylie. He'd withdrawn from the semi-pro circuit. He'd gotten a job at an outdoor gear company, entry-level warehouse and fulfillment. He was living with a teammate from his college days. He'd started seeing a therapist. In October, he texted me. The first text he'd ever sent me that wasn't forwarded from a family group thread. It said, "Heather, I know I don't have the right to ask anything of you, but I need to say I'm sorry. Not a text sorry, a real sorry. Can I call sometime?" I waited 4 days before I answered. I said, "Not yet, but maybe." That was honest. In November, Bridget and I drove to Astoria on a Saturday. I hadn't been back since before Grandma June's funeral. We parked on Riverview Terrace and sat in the car looking at the house. New owners had painted it a soft gray. The hydrangeas along the front walk were still there. She'd planted those herself 30 years ago. I got out of the car and walked to the edge of the public sidewalk and just stood there for a while. The new owners weren't home. The hydrangeas were blooming even this late in the season. Grandma June had a saying she'd repeat every time I left after a visit. She'd stand on the porch and wave and call out, "Don't you disappear on me, Heather girl." I always called the next Sunday. I didn't disappear. They made me disappear. They made me disappear. They handed her the silence and told her it was mine. I stood on that sidewalk in November and I said out loud, quietly enough that only Bridget could hear, "I found everything, Gran. I'm sorry I couldn't get back sooner. I'm not disappearing anymore." Bridget put her hand on my arm and we stood there until the wind off the river got too cold. Then we drove home, got dinner, talked until midnight, and I slept better than I had in months. In January, I updated my emergency contacts at every hospital, every clinic, every account. Primary contact, Bridget Connell. Relationship, chosen family. The intake coordinator at my own clinic looked at the form and looked at me and said, "Good." I knew she meant it. In February, Ethan texted again. He said he'd enrolled in community college, business administration, because he wanted to understand how money actually worked before he made any more decisions. He said Coach Whitmore had called him and he hadn't called back. He said he was trying to figure out who he was when no one was tracking his performance metrics. I wrote back, "That's a good question to ask. Most people never get to." He said, "I want to be someone worth knowing, not worth investing in. Worth knowing." I thought about that for a long time. I wrote back, "Then you already know more than they taught you." People ask me sometimes if I feel guilty. About the party, the lawsuit, the house, the press. I think about it honestly, and the answer is no. Not because I wanted to destroy anyone, but because the truth was already there. I just stopped hiding it for them. They built a life from the story that I didn't need them. That I was fine on my own. That I was sturdy enough to be ignored. The story was a lie they told so they didn't have to feel anything about choosing. I was not fine on my own. I was lonely and overlooked and slowly trained to call it independence. I worked 9 years and sent them everything I earned and watched them spend it on someone else and thanked them for the privilege of being included in the family name. Grandma June saw me. She called me by my name in every letter she ever wrote to my mother, in every conversation, in her will. She tried to give me everything she had and they took it and handed me nothing and called that an estate. She saw me and they erased her just like they erased me. I'm not erased anymore. I have Bridget, who has driven me to 2 surgeries and kept a thermos of cold tea in her car for 3 months just in case I needed it. I have Veronica Holt, who called my parents 4 times and sat with me in a hospital room and held my professional life together while I was learning how to breathe again. I have Uncle Don, who texts me now on Sundays sometimes just to check in. No agenda. Just checking in. I have Ethan maybe. We'll see. He's doing the hard work. That counts for something. And I have myself, finally, without apology, the person who deposited her first paycheck at 17 and wrote, "For us" on the memo line because she still believed it. I don't blame her for believing. She deserved a family that meant it. I'm building the family that means it now. And I am not even a little, fine on my own. I've thought a lot about the word consequences since all of this happened. Not in a dramatic way. Just in the quiet, practical way you think about things when you're sitting alone in an apartment that finally feels like yours, with no one's voicemail waiting to explain themselves. What my parents did wasn't a single mistake or a moment of bad judgment. It was a pattern they built over years, and patterns don't collapse on their own. Every time they chose Ethan's tournament over my school presentation, every time they said Heather's fine and moved on, they were making a small deposit into a very large debt. They just assumed it would never come due. People who build their lives on the silence of someone who loves them tend to assume that silence is permanent. It isn't. I spent 9 years depositing my paychecks into a fund I believed in. I wrote "for us" on the first memo line, and I meant it. That wasn't stupidity. That was trust, and trust given honestly is never something to be ashamed of. What happened to that trust is on them. The moment I stopped blaming myself for believing in them was the moment I got genuinely free, not from anger, not from grief, but from the story they'd written about me. The story where I was sturdy and self-sufficient and didn't really need anyone. Grandma June knew the truth. She left me her house and her savings because she watched me drive to Astoria alone when she had surgery. She knew which one of her grandchildren called every Sunday. She saw clearly what my parents had trained themselves not to see. And they took what she tried to give me and spent it on a truck and a kitchen renovation and coaching fees, and then told me there was nothing left. That's not a financial crime in a vacuum. That's what happens when people convince themselves that some members of a family are investments and others are just overhead. The cause is always the invisible tax they put on me. The effect is what happened at that pavilion in June. I didn't go to that party to burn anything down. I went because the truth was already there, sitting in probate records and bank statements, in an old email where my dad described me as always landing on her feet, like that was a compliment and not an excuse. All I did was stop carrying it alone. Bridget once told me that integrity is what you do when you think no one's watching. I'd add something to that. Integrity is also what you do when you've been watching yourself disappear for years and you finally decide to stop. Ethan is figuring out who he is without a performance metric attached to his name. That takes real courage, maybe more than anything I did. I had documents and a clear cause. He has to look at his whole life and decide what was real. I hope he gets there. As for me, I'm 29. I'm a pediatric OT. I have a coworker who kept a cold thermos of tea in her car for 3 months, and I have a grandmother who left me everything she had because she loved me. They stole the money. They couldn't steal what it meant. I know I was loved. I know someone saw me. That's not nothing. That's everything.